He was the pupil and successor of Diogenes of Babylon. What do we know about him? In this video, I will tell you everything that the ancient sources say about his life and his teachings. Welcome to my channel. Antipater of Tarsus is a relatively obscure figure in ancient philosophy. Even though he was the pupil and the successor of Diogenes of Babylon, one of the central figures in Stoicism, we don't have much information about his life and work. We only have some scattered references in ancient sources, but from these, we can still piece together an interesting story. He was born in Tarsus, which was a city in Cilicia, an area on the Mediterranean coast of what is today Turkey. His father was named Patroclus. And according to one story, he had a twin brother named Cleanthes. If the story is true, and there's no way to confirm it, then their birthdays would have fallen on the same day as the birthdays of Zeno and Cleanthes, the founder and one of the central figures in Stoicism. But there seems to be some confusion about whether or not Antipater had a twin brother. It depends on which ancient source you consult. According to Plutarch, for instance, he did not have a twin brother, but according to Diogenes Laertius, he did. And Diogenes Laertius tends to be more reliable than Plutarch. So let's assume that they were twins. His father wanted Antipater to follow in his footsteps and become a merchant like him. But from an early age, Antipater was interested in philosophy instead. So when he grew up, he traveled to Athens and there he became the pupil of Diogenes of Babylon. This must have happened around the year 200 BC. Under the guidance of Diogenes, he studied philosophy, but already at this point, Antipater began to disagree with his teacher about how to interpret the teachings of Zeno. And after studying together for some years, Antipater broke away from Diogenes to develop his own school of thought. According to a story told by Plutarch, Antipater was invited to the court of Ptolemy IV, the king of Egypt, where he met with the famous general and statesman Sosibius. Realizing that Antipater was a philosopher, Sosibius decided to put him to the test and he asked Antipater to explain the meaning of life. Without hesitation, Antipater replied, "To live according to nature." That answer did not impress Sosibius, so he ordered that Antipater should be thrown into a dungeon until he could come up with a better answer. But the next day, Sosibius came to see if Antipater had changed his mind, and he found him sitting calmly in his cell. So he asked him, "Are you still saying that the meaning of life is to live according to nature?" And Antipater said, "What else would you have me say? For I have often reflected on the subject, but I can find no better answer." Then Sosibius asked him, "And what does living according to nature mean?" And Antipater replied, "It means living virtuously." Impressed by his pupil's courage and conviction, Sosibius set him free and made him a member of his court. This story illustrates how the Stoics tried to put the ideas that they learned into practice in their everyday lives. The question of how to live a good life is one of the central questions in philosophy, and the Stoics believed that the answer was simple. It is to live according to nature. Nature is rational, so we need to use our reason to understand what our place in the cosmos is and what our duties are. And nature is also social, so we need to be good citizens and contribute to the common good. The Stoics thought that everyone can live a good life because everyone has the same nature. So it doesn't matter if you are a slave or a free man, rich or poor, the goal of life is the same for all of us. The story about Antipater also shows how important it was for the Stoics to defend their ideas against their opponents. The skeptics, for instance, doubted that we can ever really know anything. So they claimed that we shouldn't pretend to have all the answers. But the Stoics argued back that we can trust our reason and that we have a duty to use it to try to understand the world around us. Later in his life, Antipater returned to his hometown, Tarsus, where he lived for the rest of his life. We don't know exactly when he died, but it must have been sometime before 63 BC. Because the Roman philosopher Cicero mentions him in a letter that he wrote in that year. He says that he has just received a letter from Atticus, his friend, who tells him that he has sent him some books by Antipater of Tarsus, the Stoic philosopher. So we can say with certainty that Antipater died sometime before 63 BC. He had quite a few students, some of whom became very famous, such as the philosopher and Delphic oracle Athenodorus of Tarsus and the poet Carina. But perhaps his most famous student was Mark Antony, one of the triumvirs who ruled the Roman Empire after the assassination of Julius Caesar. When young, Antony visited the school of Antipater in Athens, and he became a lifelong admirer of Stoicism. Years later, when he was at war with Octavian, who would become the first emperor of Rome, he met Cicero in Athens and asked him to send Antipater to Bithynia to help settle the province. When Cicero declined, Antony threatened war unless he agreed to send Antipater instead. When the philosopher arrived at Antioch's court, he was given a hero's welcome and he spent a happy last year of his life there. According to Pliny the Younger, when he was dying, he asked to have the ashes of Antipater brought to him so that he could bury them in his family tomb. From the fragments of his work that have survived, we can see that Antipater was heavily influenced by his teacher, Diogenes of Babylon. Like Diogenes, he believed that the main goal of philosophy was to bring happiness to people's lives. And he thought that this could be achieved by following 3 simple rules: to accept what happens, to think about what happens, and to remember that everything is interconnected. Antipater believed that we can achieve happiness if we stop fighting against fate, because everything happens for a reason. Fate is always fair and impartial, and it is always working towards a greater good. If we believe that what happens to us is random and meaningless, then we will suffer. But if we believe that everything happens according to a divine plan, then we will be at peace. Antipater also believed that we need to reflect on what is happening in our lives. We need to ask ourselves why things are happening and what we can learn from them. When we do this, we will realize that everything is interconnected and that everything happens for a reason. Finally, Antipater believed that we need to remember that everything is interconnected. Nothing happens in isolation. Everything is part of a chain of events that goes back to the beginning of time and will continue into eternity. When we understand this, we will realize that we are all part of something bigger than ourselves, and we will feel connected to everything around us. If you enjoyed this episode, you might also enjoy my podcast, where I discuss ancient philosophy. You can listen to it on various platforms. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.